Today we will talk about sociology. This is a very new subject, as we always talk about it in the class of students, of course. And not only sociology I want to talk, but I also want to talk about social anthropology along with sociology. And before I introduce sociology or social anthropology, I also want to say that in the vast field of social sciences, when we talk about different subjects, sociology got a fame after all other social sciences had already established, or we can say that they were already in place. And sociology, of course, following Comtean discovery as he made of sociology. So, we say that it is a new subject, a new social science which was discovered in the late 19th century. But a very important idea which I want to share is that how sociology was emerged as a social sciences. And this emergence of social science called sociology or social anthropology was actually a transformation of ideas from being thinking to a theory, which I am referring to here as social theory. So, this is so basically the origin of sociology or social anthropology is a transformation of social thinking to social theory. So, this is what my argument is about introducing the subject. And for that, what I want to say is that a very simple question. Whenever I raise it in my class, I ask students, do you know what society is, or can we see it, or simple questions like this, or simply if I say, can you show me where does society rest. So, and students they suddenly they start thinking, and this was the point where I also started thinking that when I raised a very simple question about what do we mean by society, and when learners of a subject like sociology, when learners, I mean students, when they start thinking about it, I also started thinking that where do we actually go from this stage. So, I will use some of the references like Auguste Comte's one reference of law of three stages, where he says how human thinking develops from one stage to another. And he talks about the theological stage, and then thinking goes on towards the metaphysical stage, and then ultimately to a scientific stage, which is also called as positive stage. Or for example, Karl Marx's idea of the history of society, which has always been a struggle between two different classes. So, if we see an ancient society where there was a struggle between masters and slaves, and in a medieval society a struggle between serfs and lords, and then another stage where there is a struggle between capitalists and workers. So, this is not only a stage of a change of human social setup, but also a change wherein a thinking is also taking a new shape. So, for that matter, I have tried to argue in my words what I am sharing right now, that social thinking, it takes a new form which is called as social theory, and this becomes a base on which this new discipline emerges, originates, and I am talking about sociology or social anthropology. Another important point, that why do I want to talk about sociology and social anthropology together? Because there are scholars in social sciences, in anthropology or in sociology particularly, those who do not differentiate much in these two subjects. Like Kroeber is one very important anthropologist who argues that sociology and anthropology are twin sisters. So for that matter, I think I would like to follow these words, wherein I also don't want to make a much distinction, because the ultimate very basic concept which is studied in both sociology as well as anthropology, and that is culture. And but very important point or an additional point which I want to make is that both the aspects, but the material as well as non-material aspects of culture, have to be taken into consideration as a subject matter of sociology or anthropology. So I want to start with culture, and of course another important concept which I was already talking about, society, a basic concept of sociology or social anthropology. So I want to say that what is the component of society, or what is required to form a society, or if there are people, can we call a group of people a society, or how is it different from a simple crowd, or how a social, and I am using the term social along with crowd. So, can we say a social crowd is different from social group, a social community is different from social group, or how does a community differentiate from an association? These are terms which are sociologically or anthropologically very relevant terms, but in our everyday life we use these terms very casually. Whenever I talk to, not only to particularly to students of sociology, when I talk to in general students of social sciences, and I ask them this question, do you know the difference between community and association? Do you know the difference between society and institution, for example? Because they have used these terms 1,000 times in their academic everyday life, or in their otherwise casual life, everyday life I am talking about, but they never think about it. They never think what is the essence of the meaning of using a particular word. So let us start with a word which is, of course, which is a base on which we simply say sociology. Sociology is a study of society or culture for that matter. So I just want to talk to students about this basic concept. What do we mean by society? And for that we also need to trace the history of society a little bit. For that only I was using references from Law of Three Stages of Auguste Comte, or the dialectical materialism, or the dialogue between different classes throughout the history of society according to Karl Marx. So this is this becomes important to talk about those elements. So there are three important elements I want to argue, which can be called as important characteristics of every society or every human being who is referred to as a member of any society. So firstly, what I want to refer here is the interaction of one individual with another individual, and then not only interaction of individual with individual, but also the interaction of one individual with another, for example, institution. And there are institutions like religion, politics, education, science also becomes an institution, law becomes an institution. So there are different these entities which are according to Herbert Spencer, which can be called as organs of society. So we human beings or individual members in a society, they do not interact only among themselves, but they also interact with these institutions, and they also interact to other individuals via these institutions. So there are different ways of interactions, and a very simple example I want to say, where a customer interacts with a shopkeeper, and this sort of and this is not only a simple interaction of one individual with another individual, but this is also an interaction of a person who has a different status, who has a different role. And here I am calling a person a customer. So the role of a customer, the status of being a customer, and when this customer approaches and I am saying a shopkeeper, any dealer for that matter, and asks for something. This is an interaction where you interact for something. So you because it is required, without which it is not impossible to lead your everyday life. And then similarly, the shopkeeper is also playing his own social role, and he is also having his own social position of being a shopkeeper. So this is a very, if you see keenly, I am just trying to draw your attention here, that there is a keen attention which is required to see this sort of social relationship, which is very essential. And this interaction, it produces a new relationship, a relationship of shopkeeper and a customer. So similarly, there are many more such relationships. If I say relationship of teacher and the taught, or for example a relationship of any individual human being interacting with another human individual. But another point which I want to raise here is that or which is in general, those who are not trained in sociology or social anthropology, for them interaction may be only it may happen only via using a language. But I want to clarify here that there are some interactions which are referred to as symbolic interactions. So sometimes if I just clap or if I just do some sort of action, a bodily action I am talking about. Suppose if I say I raise my thumb like this, and it means something, and to whom, where I'm just throwing a signal, and I'm throwing this signal to some other human being, and the other human being is able to understand this signal, because he also comes from a culture where raising a thumb like this means something, and where we are able to understand the meanings which we are communicating through symbols, and this is called symbolic interaction. So I just wanted to clarify that this interaction does not mean that the interaction through language, but also interaction through symbols. And there are different scholars who have actually worked in the area called symbolic interactionism. So what I wanted to say is that interaction is the first essential component which is required to form any society. Then second, which is in itself is being clarified when I was talking about social interaction here. The other one is social interdependence, and this interdependence is a word where we generally understand that where one depends on the other. And if I say, why do we interact? We interact because we depend on each other. Like I was giving this example of customer and a shopkeeper. Here in this relationship, a particular relationship I was saying, where a new relationship has formed of a shopkeeper and a customer. This relationship was formed because both are dependent on each other. Like a teacher is a teacher only because there are learners associated with this particular position of being a teacher. So if there is a teacher, there are learners. So there are learners, there are teachers who teach these learners. So likewise, there are many relationships which are there because they are all interdependent relationships. So we human beings, we depend on each other for everything. I will say, like I am talking here, in front of the camera, and this is also a communication between me and my audience. So this sort of interaction is also required because I depend on my audience, and my audience depends on what I want to suggest, what I want to share in the form of knowledge. So secondly, what I was arguing after social interaction, that there is social interdependence, which is a further essential component required to form any sort of society. So like one reference I would like to use here, for example, the sexual and consanguineal relationships, they are found between husband and wife, and the consanguineal relationships, which I am saying, between parents and children, which are blood relationships, or there are relationships which are also called as political relationships. So like I am not directly related to any political position. I mean, if we talk about a ministerial position, I am not directly related to that particular position, but I share a relationship via being dependent on a particular position. So I have an indirect interaction as well. So there are political relationships, like we say social relationships. So what example I was using, like there are sexual relationships, there are consanguineal relationships, and these relationships are, and there are formal relationships and informal relationships, and likewise I was saying political relationships and social relationships, and there are economic relationships also. So this is a sort of the relationships which are relevant to construct, to form any society, what I want to actually argue here. So these three important components, one social interaction, the second one social interdependence, and the third one social relationships, are required at every point of time to create a society, or in a way I am saying that without which making a society is impossible. So this simple question which I always ask students, and I tell them that can you see society, can you talk about it? So they start imagining. What I want to say is that they start thinking about it, and this thinking leads to an ultimate theory, which I am referring here as social theory. So all the thoughts, the imaginations of society, they take a shape of theory, which I call as social theory, and it becomes a basis of this new discipline called sociology or social anthropology, which is ultimately a study of society and human culture. So in one definition, we can also say sociology is a study of not only society in general, but also of social interactions, social interdependence, social relationships. So with this definition, I want to conclude that sociology, of course, it's a new discipline. It is a new, or we can say modern social science, which talks about society in general, and in many of the the texts we find that it is a study of almost everything under the sky, because society doesn't have a fixed boundary, it is very flexible. So when we talk about sociology as a social science, it talks about society in general. So sociology also becomes a generalizing social science. So with this I want to end here. Thank you.